Alrighty, moving on to the next one. The next one tells us that we've got angle G is going to be congruent to angle FIJ, so that one right there. So if I'm using this parallel line and that parallel line, and now we use IG as our transversal, there's alternate interior angle that we had there. And not only do they tell us we have alternate interior angles, they tell us that they're congruent. So that makes that be the alternate interior angle theorem again. Alrighty, looking at the next one, they tell us that angle IFJ is going to be congruent to angle G. Well, there's not any way for those two to be congruent using the rules. So let's double check the math that they've done and see if we can do that. So if I'm looking from step 4 to step 5 to see what's the same and what changed, there's angle G. And instead of angle FIJ, they wrote angle IFJ. Well, is there anywhere up here that says instead of angle FIJ, we can write angle IFJ? Yep, right up here in step 2. They tell us that those two are congruent to each other. So instead of this, they wrote that. That's going to be substitution property. And then last one, they have us moving there to there. So angle G stays exactly the same. And then instead of angle IFJ, they write angle GHJ. So we've got to go up above and find a step that says angle IFJ congruent angle GHJ. Right there. So instead of this, they were able to write that. And that's going to be substitution property. Next example, they tell us that line GI is parallel to line WY and line TV is parallel to line GI. They want us to complete the proof to show that angle SUT is congruent to angle YXZ. This is our given, and this is our proof. This is where we're starting, and this is where we need to end up. So I'm going to mark all this in our picture. So GI is right there. They tell us that it's going to be congruent to WY. So that one right there. They also tell us that TV, and I'm going to use 2 arrow marks, and I'm marking them below to help me tell the difference between, so I'm not getting them confused, and then GI. So the outside lines are parallel to each other, and the 2 lines on the right are going to be parallel to each other. So they want us to show that SUT, so this angle right there, is going to be congruent to angle YXZ, that one right there. Well, normally we would be able to just say, okay, those are alternate exterior angles for those two because those are parallel, but they're not parallel, so we can't say that. So we've got to work through with what we have and see where we can get to. So for this one, they tell us line GI parallel to line WY, and that's our given, and then line TV is parallel to line GI, also given. And then they tell us that angle SUT so you see they start introducing angles that they want to talk about as part of the proof. So they've already got SUT in there. Is congruent to angle GHS. That one right right there. And if we look, well, these two lines are parallel to each other because of those arrows right there. So that one's parallel to that one. And then this one right here is our transversal. So if we're just focusing on the stuff we need, those are going to be corresponding angles. And they went ahead and told us that that's the corresponding angle postulate. So we need to figure out where to go next because we have a blank there. So these are the ones that we have. And we want to find a way to somehow introduce this angle right here. So is there a way to say that this angle right here is related to that angle right there? Well, are those two lines related at all, that they touch? They sure are. That one right there is going to be parallel to that one right there. So if I'm looking at this angle compared to that angle, those are going to be alternate exterior angles. So we can say that angle ZXY, but I'm going to double check and make sure I put the letters in the same exact order that they have in our proof. So I'm going to use angle YXZ is going to be congruent to angle GHS, and that is the right order. So angle GHS, and because of our alternate exterior angle theorem. And we're not done because we don't have SUT is congruent to angle YXZ. So we would need to click the Add the Line button and add a line 5. So if I'm looking for what I want and what we need, we've got angle YXZ, but instead of a GHS, we want to have a SUT, because there's our YXZ and there's our YXZ there. So is there anywhere up here that says angle GHS is the same thing as angle SUT? Yep, if you look back at that step right there, sure is. So we can now say that angle YXZ is congruent to angle SUT, but when I write it, I'm going to put it in the same exact order that they have here in the proof, just to make sure that we get it right and we don't miss it just because it's out of order. I don't think they do that, but you never know. So angle SUT is congruent to angle YXZ. And this was instead of this, I wrote a that. So that's our substitution property. And last one, whenever you start getting up in the 95s and above, they're going to start giving you proofs where you pretty much have to fill in everything. So with this, they want us to prove that the measure of angle angle VUW plus the measure of angle PRS is going to be equal to 180 degrees. So if I find those in the picture, VUW, so that one right there, plus PRS is going to be equal to 180 degrees. Well, if you're wanting to go, well, you can just say that because those are going to be consecutive exterior angles for those two lines, or same side exterior angles for those lines. We can't say that because line TV and line QS, they aren't parallel to each other. See how that one has one arrow and this one has two? They're not parallel. So let's start with what they say is parallel. They tell us that line TV is parallel, so there's two, line XZ, and that's given. I know they didn't list it over here, but they do give us that information in the picture, so that can be considered part of the given. All right, looking at the next step, those aren't the only lines that we have parallel on there. We also have line QS is parallel to line XZ. And again, we know this because they gave it to us in the picture. Alrighty, so I want to find a way to introduce one of these two angles into our proof. So you pick one. There's lots of different options that you could type in for there, and as long as you're using the correct notation, it will take any of the different options that you pick, as long as you're using our angle pair relationships, theorems, and definitions, as long as you're using them properly. So I'm going to pick to go with PRS and introduce that one into my proof. Well, the only line that QS is parallel with is XZ, so I'm going to talk about PYZ. So looking at those two, QS and XZ, those two are parallel, which makes these two be corresponding angles. So I'm going to say angle PRS is going to be congruent to angle PYZ because of our corresponding angle postulate. All right, so now I've got PYZ in our proof. Now we want to somehow relate PYZ to angle W. I'm going to go VUW because that's what they put there, to VUW. Well, can we make a direct relationship between those two? We sure can. That line's parallel to that line. So we can just go ahead and say that angle PYZ plus angle, and I'm going to make sure to use the letters in the order that they are up here, VUW is going to be equal to 180 degrees. And we know that because of our consecutive exterior angle theorem. Well, we're getting close to where we want to go because they want two things added together to be equal to 180. I've got two things added together to equal 180. Let's match up and see if everything is what we need it to be. So here's a VUW, there's a VUW, there's a 180, there's a 180. PRS. Well, I don't have a PRS here. Instead of a PRS, we have an angle PYZ. So if you look right there, it says PYZ is the same thing as angle PRS. So for the next step, and I'm going to put it in the order to match up there, angle VUW plus angle PRS is going to be equal to 180 degrees. So instead of the PYZ, we wrote PRS. So instead of this, we wrote that, and that's going to be substitution.